Imagine a peaceful evening in early medieval Bengal. A simple song echoes over the water about a calm river, a wooden boat, and a fisherman casting his net. To the casual listener, these are just the sounds of a rustic folk tune. Curious, but for scholars, the text of these songs felt wrong. The grammar was strangely truncated, and the syntax seemed deliberately broken, ignoring the standard poetry conventions of the 8th to 12th centuries. These strange verses vanished for centuries until the early 1900s, when a researcher found a fragile set of palm leaf manuscripts hidden in the royal archives of Nepal. If these were merely harmless rhymes about catching fish, they wouldn't have been stored in a foreign royal vault and protected with such intense linguistic secrecy. These verses are actually highly classified tantric manuals, written in Sandhya Bhasha, a twilight language designed to hide radical teachings in plain sight. Between the 8th and 12th centuries, the Pala dynasty transformed eastern India into a vast empire of massive stone monasteries. These institutions tightly controlled religious life, keeping spiritual knowledge locked behind the barrier of classical Sanskrit, a language only accessible to elite scholars. A group of wandering mystics called the Siddhacharyas eventually rebelled against this monopoly. They were the perfected ones, walking away from the monasteries to live among the common people. The Siddhas believed enlightenment didn't come from abstract study, but through the physical human body. Their practice focused on the immediate world, the mud, the markets, and the everyday reality of the working class. To survive the crackdown from the religious establishment, the Siddhas had to encode their subversion. They embedded their spiritual blueprints into the common, everyday language of the streets. Their code relied on polysemy, using one word to hold two entirely different meanings. A single noun splits down two paths, an innocent literal object for the public, and a hidden tantric instruction for the initiate. Take the river, or nadi. To a traveler, it's a waterway, but to a siddha, nadi refers to the internal energy channels that a practitioner must learn to control during meditation. The fisherman in these poems is actually the mystic. When he casts his net to catch a fish, the poem is describing a specific technique of mental focus used to pull the soul away from worldly attachments. Even the ghosts are part of the manual. They represent the illusions and psychological blocks that haunt the mind. The verses provide the method for straightening out that mental static. This layered lexicon meant that a siddha could sing an entire manual of forbidden spiritual techniques in a busy market. The authorities nearby only heard a simple song about crossing a river. Interpreting these layers required more than just sight. The code relied on a specific physical performance. The true meaning only revealed itself through precise rhythmic cadences and breath control. The siddhas used nasalization and phonetic echoing as mnemonic anchors. These vibrations let them carry complex instructions within their own physical rhythms. For centuries, this code lived only in the air. But as the tradition faced extinction, later scribes attempted a nearly impossible task, freezing those secretive oral chants into permanent ink on palm leaves. Because the code relied on specific street pronunciations and regional accents to work, the scribes had to write exactly how the people spoke, rather than using the formal rules of Sanskrit. By standardizing those local street sounds to protect the code, these scribes inadvertently created the first written record of a distinct language identity. These secretive tantric manuals are in fact the birth of Old Bengali. Most global languages solidify in royal courts or government offices. They're the tools of the powerful, standardized to make ruling easier. Bengali took the opposite path. It emerged from a subversive, whispered code used by outcasts. It was a language born from the need to hide spiritual liberation from the people in charge. The Charyapada proves that lasting changes to how we think and speak don't always descend from the top. More often, they survive in plain sight, carried by the voices and the everyday struggles of the marginalized.